Welcome back to the Compliance Edge podcast. I am your host, Mrs. Muluwampundu Chola, legal counsel, mom, wife, woman of God, funny person in my opinion, and I'm so happy to have you back here. We had great reviews of our episode 1 talking about risk management, and we have been planning on what to discuss on this episode, and of course, we have to talk about compliance. It's just not possible for us to go on without talking about compliance. So today, on this episode, we are going to talk about compliance myths. What is true and what is just nonsense, okay? We'll be talking about compliance myths versus reality. And we will be debunking 10 compliance myths, and I'll be teaching you about what is actually the reality in practice. I hope that you enjoy this episode. We're going to dive right in and just stay tuned with me, okay? If you ever wondered what compliance really means, or if you ever heard some common misconceptions, this episode is for you. Whether you're a student or you're in practice or you're a business person, this episode is for you, and I can't wait to read your comments after this. We also received some wonderful questions from the audience, so we'll be answering those. And of course, we're going to end with a Bible verse, as we always do on the Compliance Edge podcast. So let's get right into it, okay? Myth number 1 says compliance is just about following the law. Compliance is just about following the law. So, is compliance just about avoiding legal trouble? That says no, okay? While following the law is very critical, of course, compliance being following regulations, making sure that happens. Real compliance actually goes beyond that. It goes into procedure, it goes into policy, which is your internal regulation, okay? It's about maintaining ethical standards. Now, we are going to have an episode later that talks about ethics, but ethical standards is just basically, what is the right moral standing of what I am doing? What is acceptable in society to do? And this covers leadership. This covers your interaction with other people in the business. This covers your interaction between employer and employee. And just remember, we always look at compliance as a company being a corporate citizen. So how are you interacting with other corporate citizens? That's also ethical standards. Okay, so there's widely accepted things in the business environment and with human beings that need to be honored, and compliance is following those as well. So it's not just about following the law. It's also about establishing good corporate governance practices and preventing risks that could harm your business. In our last episode, which you should watch if you haven't already, we were able to talk about risk management and what that embodies. So compliance would definitely also be you following, the recommendations from your risk registry, okay, and making sure that you are acting within a good governance structure, following your regulations internally and externally, and also just following the right procedure. So compliance isn't just about following the law. It's about doing the right thing from start to finish, okay, according to what is prescribed. So myth number 2, only big corporations need to worry about compliance. Only big corporations need to worry about compliance. So do small businesses really need compliance programs? Say you're a startup and you're watching this and thinking, Moluwa, do I really need this? I've just started. Well, the answer is compliance is for everyone. Okay, compliance is for everyone, including you. Small businesses can face very serious risks. If anything, they're at a higher risk of ending or being squished by the very busy business environment. Okay, and the first tool that you need as a small business is to make sure that you're in good standing with the law. You have internal policy, okay, to make sure that you are acting in a way that is building your business in the right direction. Okay. Having started businesses myself, I can assure you that being in compliance is the first thing that will help you, because if you run into regulators and they are prepared to squish you because you haven't done the right thing, you don't have the right licenses, then that's problematic. So being compliant is everyone. Okay, you don't want to start your business and run into fines or legal action or face reputational damage and end even before you start. So compliance is for everyone, not just the big businesses, though of course it can be more robust with big businesses. So this is for you if you are a legal counsel or compliance officer within a huge organization. I'm sure you have so many testaments about just how crazy it is to keep up. But I hope that as we share, you're able to, pick out the tools that you need. Okay, one such tool that I truly believe in, having been a compliance officer myself, is you have to have a great legal and compliance framework. You have to be able to keep track. Monitoring and evaluation is one of the biggest tools that you could use. But you know what? I won't tell you too much about that because Vantage Point actually has a compliance officers training workshop that is coming up at the beginning of March. And I can't wait for you to see that. We have actually purposely made it really affordable because we want to equip compliance officers with the tools to be able to succeed without breaking the bank. So more news is coming on that, and I hope as you see this episode, you'll be able to see the details in our comment box where you can subscribe for that training, okay? Specific for compliance officers or those aspiring to be that. But as at now, what I can say is that compliance programs are not just about big organizations. They're about small, medium, everybody as well. And you just need to get the right tools to be able to manage your compliance well. As a compliance officer, you're pretty much like a goalkeeper, okay? You are trying not to get legal trouble or anything coming through your way. You want to make sure that you are covered and you have an airtight system that will protect your organization. So that is needed for everybody, okay? At least have the basics of compliance in place. Okay. Myth number 3, compliance officers are business blockers. Compliance officers are business blockers. So do compliance officers just slow down innovation? This one I really want to talk about because I have worked as a compliance officer and it can feel like pulling teeth. Okay, you're telling accounts, because the thing is this, to give you more context, if you're a student or, somebody you are trying to be in everybody's business to make sure that the organization is flowing seamlessly. Okay, what you're trying to do as a compliance officer is create a well-oiled machine. So you are making sure accounts is doing the invoices if that's the procedure that is within your organization. You're making sure that your CEO is not just saying anything that could put legal in a problem. You are the careful person in the company, and a lot of times you can face resistance from those people who are trying to bring out ideas, even when it comes to corporate social responsibility departments. They're ready to just do what they can do, but you have to make sure everything is done according to the book as the compliance officer. And that can be tough, but the answer is not at all. They are not slowing down innovators or being business blockers. A strong compliance function ensures that businesses can innovate responsibly. So they are just in place. Don't hate on the compliance officer in your organization, okay? They're just in place to innovate, to make sure that your innovations are responsibly created and that you are not getting into any legal trouble. So like we looked at in episode 1, risks are alive to us, and so we have to make sure that with compliance we are creating that barrier to mitigate the negative effects of those risks, okay? So they help you minimize risk. That's why a lot of organizations now pair compliance and risk functions as well as legal functions together. It's a smart thing to do. It can be a very busy kind of role, and I always say the best is to have a risk officer, compliance officer within the legal department. That's what would be very powerful. But do what works for your organizational structure and make the best of it, okay? Ensuring that new ideas are executed within legal and ethical boundaries is what actually makes an excellent compliance officer. So They are not business blockers. They're not blocking or slowing down innovations. They're just making sure that you're safe even as you innovate. Okay. So let's go to myth number 4. Okay. Myth number 4 is once policies are in place, compliance takes care of itself. No. Okay. No. You listen to me right now. No. Your policies are in place, but compliance is an ongoing process. It doesn't just end there. Of course, it's wonderful to have policies that are robust. Have policies, I would advise on policies, have policies that are clear, concise, straightforward. And remember, I'm giving you this advice for free, okay? Every employee within your organization needs to acknowledge that they have read and understood the policy that you have put in place. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of issues when it comes to executing disciplinary actions. But that's a topic for another day. For now, just make sure there is a system in place for everybody to acknowledge the company policy. But the policies, as much as they are in place, to help you. Okay, actually, let's start here for those who may not know what policy is. So, externally, for an organization, you have to comply with external laws. Okay, your constitution, your employment code, your company's act, and so on and so forth. But within yourselves, you need regulation that will be able to help you run the company according to how the board of directors and the proprietors of the business wanted it to run, and according to, of course, the lessons that you have learned along the way. So you formulate policy to deal with specific issues. Okay, Section 95 of the Employment Code of Zambia actually gives you a stipulation of certain policies that have to be in place: a disciplinary policy, an HIV policy, a grievance policy. These should be there in order to protect the rights of those within the organization and also protect the organization itself. So in order to have seamless relationships between those who are internally in the organization, of course, your policy cannot be ultra vires your external policy, your external regulation rather. So you cannot have policy within your organization that is outside of the law. Okay, for example, you can't have policy within your organization that if somebody is late, you will whip them 5 times. Why? Because against their constitutional rights. So it is, ultra vires the law, and that's why it can't be legal policy. But your policy should actually bring the law closer to you. Okay, it should actually be used as a tool for compliance officers to make sure that people really take seriously what is required of them at a certain level. Hence the law stipulating certain policies being in place. But of course, you can have a policy for as many things as you need dealt with. Okay, to avoid long conversation and to just keep things straightforward. So I'd advise that your policy should be straightforward, concise, simple, and remember, acknowledged by the members within the organization. Okay, I use members as a very loose term because in terms of company structure, members can be referred to the shareholders, and that's not what I mean. I mean the employees and those who are directly affected by the execution of policy. Okay, so when policy is in place, does that mean compliance takes care of itself? No, that's a myth. That's not true. Okay, compliance is an ongoing process because as regulation externally changes, regulation internally, that is your policy, has to be adjusted as well. And in order for people to understand policy, training will be required. That's why you need to call Vantage Purchase Consultants. Okay, so we can come in, analyze your policy, make sure that it is perfectly set, but also train your employees. It's always good to have external parties train your employees. Or if you have an internal trainer, I've seen that with a lot of organizations. I think that's really powerful, but depending on how your expertise are and how often you need to train. But if your compliance officer can organize training for the employees just to make sure the organization is aligned all the way from the board to the leadership to the employees on the ground, everybody should be aligned with what the policy says, and the policy should be aligned with the intentions of the board. So very important. Monitoring and active engagement discussion is completely is very much additional to what you need to be doing other than setting the policies in place. So I know that a lot of organizations just have a nice stack of policies in HR's office saying these are the company policies, and nobody knows what is in the policies. They haven't been talked about in years. They haven't been dusted off. They haven't been adjusted as the law adjusts and as the business environment changes. And that's not correct. You need to review your policy every year and make sure that your policy is updated. You need to set new policy even as time stays. For example, you would have policy in place because of COVID-19, okay, where there's now policy for everyone to wear a mask in the organization. That policy is effective. But whereas it was extremely effective in 2021, it may not be so effective today, depending on your business environment, okay? They may find you a bit unreasonable to still be asking everyone to wear a mask, depending on what you're doing in the business. So if you are, of course, working in a very specific industry and that is a mitigational, thing to do in terms of risk, that's up to you. But what I'm trying to demonstrate is that it moves with the times. So without these, even the best policies won't be effective. Okay. Yeah. So myth number 5, that compliance is just common sense. I've seen myself as somebody who takes compliance very seriously, especially with the roles that I've been able to hold. Hence, the podcast even being called the Compliance Edge podcast. What we're trying to communicate with businesses is that this particular aspect of business compliance is key to any other thing that you do. That if you are compliant, you will have great policy. If you are compliant, you will respect your risk registry. If you are compliant, you will not be in trouble with the law. And if you are compliant, you would even be compliant with the recommendations of your board of directors. So your board of directors will give a direction, and compliance would mean executing that, of course, with the supervision of the company secretary. Very, very well. So it's super important, and it's not just common sense, okay? Is it simply like using good judgment? That's a myth. I would say while ethics and judgment play a role, compliance involves complex laws and regulations that aren't always intuitive as they may seem. That's why it's very good to have the advice of legal counsel to be able to review and walk you through the intention of the lawmakers or the regulators. It's very important to be found on the right side. Consult, okay? So it's more than just having good judgment, okay? It requires a very structured approach and understanding of the specific industry requirements. So depending on the industry your business is functioning in, you really need to take the time to research, understand, and I always say implement best practice. So not just the law, but what is the best thing to do. Learn from others. In law, we have something we like to call precedent, because we don't just act on what the law says. We also act on how it's been interpreted by the courts. We also act on how it has affected other people who have gone before us, and then are able to make better decisions in practice. So that's a very good way to go about it. So it's not just common sense. It takes research, takes time. Okay. Myth number 6. Compliance costs too much for small businesses. Compliance costs too much for small businesses. So the question here is compliance expensive? Is compliance expensive? Well, I would say to debunk this myth, the cost of non-compliance is even more expensive than compliance. Okay, you'd much rather hire a compliance officer or visit Vantage Point risk consultants and be able to look at your compliance framework than actually end up on the other side, in terms of non-compliance, dealing with fines, dealing with a lack of investor confidence. Okay, so the cost of non-compliance is far greater than the investment of good compliance programs. So lawsuits, lost customers, okay, can really devastate a small business. And compliance can really be tailored to fit your budget needs. So it's up to you how to go about it. Okay, you can use tools like we explained even with risk management. There are tools that can help you have compliance at your level, whether you have a salon or you have a multinational company. Either way, you can adjust your compliance program to suit your budget and your needs. And there are definitely a lot of organizations out there to help you, or at least not that many. I know I'm privileged to work for one that really prioritizes compliance for small businesses, starting budgets from as low as 5,000 kwacha, just to help a small business be able to set up a good compliance framework and be set up for success. So um, definitely, of course, the budgeting team at Vantage Point knows better, but we are surely able to help from small businesses to big organizations, and it is much more costly to be non-compliant than compliant. So give it a shot. Make sure that as you start your business, you're setting yourself up for success. Okay? Myth number 7. Wow, we're really cruising through these. But I think it's a good way of learning, right? Like, let's just get to the point. So compliance is only relevant in highly regulated industries. Compliance is only relevant in highly regulated industries. So I suppose the question is compliance only for industries like banking and healthcare, where they have regulators that are on them? The answer is no. Okay, every industry has its own set of regulations. The law in most countries, if not all countries, is very robust and detailed with every business. If you're in retail, there will be laws pertaining to that business. If you are in sales, if you are in healthcare, banking, whatever it is that you are doing, there will be laws pertaining to how that business should function and how you should interact with your customers. And the first step of compliance is finding out what those laws are. What is it that affects you as a business? That's what your compliance framework actually is. You listing down and understanding everything. I have a story actually about a friend of mine who started a biking business. Okay, he bought a number of motorbikes and was ready to start his own delivery service. And to his surprise, he got fined by Zikta. Okay, the last thing he could have expected. I'm not going to go into that because we don't offer free legal advice, but I'm just trying to tell you that there are little pitfalls that could catch you as a small business if you are not careful and haven't really understood the framework that governs your business. So please, 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 please do. Okay, it's not relevant only for highly regulated industries. Every industry has its own. From data privacy, how you use the data of your customers, all the way into labor laws, okay, making sure that you know how to hire, fire, discipline your employees correctly. It's so important, and compliance applies everywhere. Even in creative fields like media and marketing, you have compliance across the board. So it's so important in agriculture as well. I'm actually supposed to talk about that. There are so many things that govern the agriculture industry, including the Zambia Environmental Management Agency, as well as other key things that are involved in delivering your produce properly. I'd actually love to hear from you. If you're in the agriculture industry, please comment and let us know what compliance pitfalls you have experienced. Because people tend to think farming is just easy and straightforward, but there are a lot of compliance issues, and I'll be looking into that. It's a very interesting field of compliance. So that's amazing. Myth number 8. Compliance is a one-time effort. Once you implement compliance, it's done, right? No, it isn't. I had this one client that said, well, thank you very much, Muluwa. You have done a great job setting us up with compliance, and I guess we're set and we're done. I couldn't convince them otherwise because, I had other clients to focus on, and I believe in sometimes people learning how they're supposed to, not that I wanted them to fail. I did set them up for success in the best that I could as their compliance consultant. But compliance is not a one and done kind of thing. Monitoring and evaluation is important. The business environment is constantly changing. And as a corporate citizen, you need to make sure that you have somebody overlooking and seeing that, because you don't have to be caught unaware. For example, you've been in the business for the past 7 years, okay? And you've been doing amazing. Your compliance was set a few years ago and you feel you're fine. But then the Data Protection Act has come out and you don't know how to implement that. It takes studying, it takes understanding, it takes seeing the practicality of it, and it takes now looking at that and adjusting it to the industry and the business that you're in, adjusting it to your specific business. You need new policies because a new law has come out. You need to adjust certain things that you're comfortable doing but are now a problem, legally speaking. Your risk has changed, and so compliance is not actually just a one and done thing. It requires updates, training, okay, to stay relevant as laws. And that's why, I suppose it may be a question to say Vantage Point risk consultants focuses on risk, but a lot of what you see us doing is training oriented. We have realized that in order to combat risks the best way, compliance is a tool. But we are not in everybody's organization, okay? Most of your organizations are independent, you know what you're doing, you've set up some sort of compliance network. So the key that we have brought forward is training, because then we'll be able to show you what the best practice is, we'll be able to show you how to go about it, and we'll be able to bring your policy to your employees in a way that they can understand. So training is a tool that we use in order to mitigate risk. And that is why it's one of our leading areas of business. But again, it's a great way for us to just engage with you, because we know that it is not a one-time effort. So if you did your compliance and you are comfortable at that time, my advice to you is get somebody to come in and train, get somebody to review your policies, and make sure that you are outstanding. Of course, when I say somebody, I mean Vantage Point. Okay? Great. So, myth number 9, compliance can be outsourced entirely. Okay, so that's a myth. Okay, can I just outsource compliance completely? Well, the answer is yes, you can outsource certain parts of compliance. Of course, don't get tired of me saying it, but honestly, it's just the area of business that we're in, and I'm the director of Global Compliance at Vantage Point, so I'm always going to encourage you to reach out to us and do things the right way. You can outsource certain parts of compliance, and compliance needs to be owned by everyone in the company. So as much as I would be happy to be your consultant and we would be happy to come and help you and do most of your compliance, we would still need for everybody in the organization to participate in the execution of compliance. Procedure is done by everybody. Your accountant needs to follow procedure. Your employees need to follow procedure. And that is all part of compliance. Your board needs to act in a good corporate governance way. Okay, ESG needs to be part of your business, and that is the best way to go about compliance, by everybody working together. All stakeholders are involved in compliance. So as much as you can outsource us or outsource your compliance function to us, one thing that you should expect is that we will constantly be speaking to you about the involvement of the stakeholders within the business. Very important. So from top managers, employees, departments, everyone must take responsibility for having a compliant and ethical culture. I would say that compliance needs to be part of the culture of the business. Okay, it just needs to be set that way, that we are compliant, we're ethical, and this is what we do. Okay. And last but not least, myth number 10. If you follow the rules, you're fully compliant. Okay. So is compliance just about following the rules? Well, Not always. Okay, like we said, compliance is about creating a culture. Okay, and when I say culture, it means make a habit of doing something. Make it that this is what you are known to be. This is what you're known to do. Okay, it's about creating a culture of integrity, accountability, and proactive risk management. Foresee what's coming and be able to mitigate it. Okay, be accountable, be transparent. Okay, you may follow the rules but still fall short of building a strong and compliant organization if you miss these key areas. Okay. Reputational risk is huge if there is a disparity between the board and the employees. Um, we've seen that with certain organizations where the employees go out to protest, but the board is actually moving in a way that they're supposed to be doing the right thing. There's only one area where shareholders can hold the directors accountable, and that is Section 331 of the Companies Act, where it says that if through a derivative action, the shareholders can hold the board of directors accountable, but they must prove negligence. There has to be negligence on the part of the board, and that is difficult. If the board can show that they are acting in the best interest of the company as agents of the company, then there's nothing that they can do. Okay, so it's very important that even by the time there is pursuit, to avoid those legal tensions between the shareholders, the board, the employees, there should be transparency, accountability. Let the decisions of the board be communicated across, and let there be that transparency. You see that with a lot of big organizations where the board of directors produces a report at the end of the year showing all their stakeholders what it is that they have done. And the key actually is to show that they are not being negligent. They are doing the best that they can. Okay, so those have been our 10 myths of compliance. And I hope that as we have talked about them, you have a better and more deep understanding of what compliance for an organization is. Listen, I'm not going to take you back into school because it took me 8 years or more of law school and all the other wonderful things that I've had to learn. Okay, experiences over a decade. And so we want the Compliance Edge podcast to be something that is easy to understand, summarizes, gets you to the point, gets you interested. But it's definitely not a supplement for doing research and studying what you need to do and understanding, what is actually on the ground in business. I hope it can just, like we said, debunk and demystify some of the things that you find difficult. In our next season, we will be having guests who are actually living the practicality of these things we're talking about. And I can't wait to do that with you guys. But for now, let's take some questions from our audience. I was very excited about these questions. Last time we read 2, but this time around we're going to read 3 questions just because I just couldn't get over how good these questions were. And I think that a lot of us would benefit from it. So audience question number 1 said, I'm a student studying law. How can I start a career in compliance? I'm very excited to hear that law students are not just looking at the typical traditional way of going about things. When we're in law school, I don't know about now, but back then everybody just wanted to be in a firm and become a judge and all that kind of thing. And, there's no problem with doing that. Some of us went against the grain and here we are. So I'm happy to hear this question, and it's a great question. I'll start by saying, step outside of just your regular courses. Okay, gain knowledge by understanding risk management, corporate governance, regulatory frameworks. I'm hoping that this Compliance Edge podcast can be that thing that brings you into that interest of understanding compliance and stepping into that space, having that knowledge easily. So I'd say subscribe to our channel and you'll be set up for success. And in terms of getting certification, like I said, we do have a compliance officers training coming up, and students are very, very welcome. It's going to be just 1,000 kwacha actually. I know my team told me not to say this, but here we go. It's only going to be 1,000 kwacha, and I'll be happy for even students to come so you can know, is this for you? Is this something you want to set yourself up to do? And there will be a certificate of participation available. So I'll be glad for you guys to come and answer more of your questions in person. That'll be amazing. So keep learning. Continuous learning is key. Okay. Question number 2. I run a small business. Do I really need a compliance officer? Okay, so I think you probably have a better idea now that we talked about this in, the myths that we have debunked. But compliance is actually important for every business, regardless of the size of the business. You don't need a compliance officer that is full-time right away, depending on the industry that you are in. But at least establish basic compliance protocols, have clear policies in place, keep it simple, okay? Have employee trainings often as possible, okay? And understand your industry regulations. Again, very passionate about helping SMEs. So consult with us at Advantage Purchase Consultants. Let us help you set up, at least initially, and create a relationship with us where we are able to advise you along the way. Please note, we do not offer legal advice. So we're not going to help you when you're in trouble. We are just here to help you establish preventative measures to your compliance. It will save you a lot of trouble down the road, and you're very welcome. Our last question is, can compliance actually help businesses make more money? Okay, this person says, I don't want to add more to my business costs. And the answer is yes. A strong compliance program really helps businesses out. It helps you avoid costly fines. It helps you minimize your risks. It helps you build trust with customers. Customers want to know that you are compliant. That's why even saloons will display their Thomas certificates and fire hazard, blah, blah. Customers want to feel safe with you. But more importantly, come, let me tell you the secret. Investors will be looking out for compliance. So if you are a small business and you're trying to gain investors, if you're a big business, if you're into mining exploration, if you are doing all of those things, you need to be compliant to give investors confidence, okay, in what it is that you're doing. It's the bare minimum for you to be following your laws and following your procedures. Even when they come and ask you to change things, compliance should be priority with you. So it opens doors for partnerships, who value ethical, sustainable business practices. And ultimately, it can be a tool for long-term profitability and growth. So compliance is not just about instant gratification. It's about that long-term goal of setting up a business that is really credible and, well respected in the business environment. Okay? So thank you so much for listening. I can't wait till you, see our next episode, okay? It might be ESG, it might not be ESG, it might be something else in the business environment, but whatever the next episode is, trust, I believe it's going to grow your information on how to run a successful business. Now, of course, in closing, we do have our Bible verse of the day, and this one is short, sweet, and concise, and it's a lesson to everybody. It's Proverbs 10 verse 9, and it reads, whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. I just want to reflect on this. Integrity is one of the key aspects that I found in business, and definitely it is the heart of compliance. When you operate with transparency and fairness, you build security and trust, not just with your business, but even with the people that you operate in the business environment, with your business partners, your customers, for everyone that you serve. Integrity may take longer to see rewards, okay, but it's always the path to lasting success and protection. Make sure your business has that as a key culture. Now, I've been your host, Muluwa Mpundu Chora. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope this clears up some of the myths and misconceptions about compliance. So see you next time on the Compliance Edge podcast. Like and share our pages. You can follow us on TikTok, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook at the Compliance Edge podcast. And you should also follow Vantage Point Risk Consultants on the same platforms. So thank you very much. Take care.